Switch 2, despite its brief volatility in sell price, shipped to most brick-and-mortar locations accompanied with an out-of-stock sign. The next generation of handheld Nintendo comes from upgraded hardware, redesigned Joy-Cons, and higher resolution. But is it enough?
Welcome to Talk About Tatooine. I'm Andrew.
I'm Nathan.
And we are twin brothers here to bring you what's new in nerddom and give colorful commentary on our favorite subjects. Welcome to our cantina. Grab a drink and settle in as we set course for realities beyond our own.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 119. Today's recording date is the 27th of June, and we're going to be releasing this on Monday, June 30th. Switch 2 has finally entered the common era. Well, sort of. The next handheld console boasts some notable improvements, including a max frame rate of 120 frames per second, up from 60 frames per second, and 1080p handheld resolution and a 4K HDR resolution while docked, up to 720p and 1080p respectively. Although across the board, the Switch 2 is not an improvement in every regard. This comes at a very heavy blow to Nintendo's loyal fan base at a steep $450 price tag that hits customers' wallets as inflation is skyrocketing and wages have been left in the dust. 8 years later, and the Switch 2 can barely be considered modern, and that's obviously less than ideal.
Let's take a second to walk through the hardware specs and compare them to something other than just the previous Switch. Nintendo has always been the king of the hill for handheld gaming, with systems like the Game Boy and its various iterations, and honestly, it's not even close. The Game Boy generation of handheld consoles was really where this technology became mainstream and you started to see sales starting in the millions. This is known as the 16-bit era and began with the release of the NEC Home Electronics PC Engine on October 30th, 1987. That's how far back we're going. This marked a change in microprocessors having 16 bits each, i.e. 16 places where a 0 or 1 can be expressed, which I think is like 2 to the 16th unique expressions. I did the math, i.e. that is 65,536 flavors of bit expression. Previous 8-bit processors had 256 unique expressions, so quite a bit lower than having a 16-bit processor.
I am literally going through like how to use binary in my classes right now. And so I was like, oh my God, I know these numbers. Show me the numbers, Mason.
Let's do the big maths energy.
Let's put that all in perspective. If you had 256 pennies, you would be able to fit them in about 5 coin sleeves. You could reasonably hold that in one hand. If you had 65,000 pennies, you would struggle to fit them all into a bucket from Home Depot. It would be a heaping bucket of pennies, probably closer to 2 buckets if you were determined not to spill. This bucket would weigh over 360 pounds. Have fun lifting that to the bank.
So the 16-bit generation is way more powerful than previous generations, and Nintendo was determined to crush this market, and crush they did. There were 3 other competitors to Nintendo in this generation of handheld consoles. The Atari Lynx at about 3 million units sold, the NEC Turbo Express at 1.5 million units, and the Sega Game Clear at 10.6 million units. During this time, the Game Boy and Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy Light sold greater than 64.4 million units. That's an absolute dominant 81% of the market. Scientifically speaking, that's a big number.
I love that. Scientifically, pushes up glasses, huge number.
It's quite large. Since the Game Boy, we evolved into Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, DS, 3DS, and Switch, and finally to the Switch 2, back to the present day. We didn't have any of these growing up, but I sure would have loved one. While Nintendo was iterating generation after generation, there wasn't a single other company that could keep up with them. Sony tried to break into the market with the PSP and PS Vita. Again, super cool items, but really never matched up to the powerhouse of Nintendo.
While the handheld market was busy getting cornered by Nintendo, they struggled in the console arena. In their defense, I don't think their intent was ever to compete with Xbox and PlayStation. Surely, they made their own home consoles with the Wii and eventually the Switch, but they supported that not by creating competitive hardware, but doubling down on their ecosystem of games.
Do you know how popular Pokemon is? These little pocket monsters are the #1 most profitable IP. For reference, Star Wars is number 4, and Warhammer wasn't even on the list. Take a guess at second and third place. What do you think the third most valuable IP of all time? What about the second?
Dude, I have no idea. If Star Wars is number 4, I'm looking at this list and I'm like, do we have to make a Pokemon podcast now?
Absolutely not. I like Pokemon, but I do not love Pokemon. I would not classify it as my special interest. Okay, so the third most valuable IP of all time is Winnie the Pooh.
I'm sorry, what?
It's on Wikipedia, so it's true. And the list of references for how they got these numbers was extensive. The second most valuable IP of all time was Mickey Mouse.
Frick the Mick, dude.
Dude, frick the Mick. Although on this list, I think it was like the top 50 most profitable IPs. Not even kidding. Like a third of them were all Disney.
I mean, that tracks.
Yeah,
Which
that
Star Wars
tracks.
is also Disney now, so it's like, welcome to the club, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse.
Yeah, so Disney stock is probably going to be a really good decision moving forward.
What does that mean? For a long time, Nintendo has created their own ecosystem of games and hardware that do not appear to be backing down from that philosophy. It's not good or bad. It just is. Meanwhile, we are seeing more cross-platform compatibility as consoles are being designed to act more like dedicated gaming PCs that you hook up to your TV. This is no more evident than in the future generation of Xbox that will be able to access your Steam library and features a simplified Windows OS that is optimized for controller. It will be interesting to see how PlayStation adapts to the changing landscape, since there are really only 3 giants in the console field. Any change in one system drastically affects that market.
Xbox, however, is looking to cut in on the handheld market with their new Xbox Ally and Ally X as part of their collaboration with Asus, building off of their existing Ally hardware. The Ally, unlike the Switch, will be more akin to the Steamdeck and not the Switch. Like we said before, the Switch has its own ecosystem of games and rarely crosses the border into large AAA titles like, Call of Duty, Halo, Battlefield, or Overwatch. Nintendo has never intended to grab a piece of that pie, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Instead, Nintendo has continued to pump out new Pokemon, Mario, and Zelda titles, along with many additional options for indie creators. This is a little reductive, but you understand, right? These IPs are only ever on the Switch or Nintendo products, and they guard those jealously. The Nintendo law department is notoriously litigious. Their primary goal in creating the Switch 2 is to bring their own IP into the present state of graphics, gameplay, and performance.
Nintendo can litigate these nuts. Looking at the specifications side by side between the Switch, Switch OLED, and the Switch 2, overall, we see some improvements, which is to be expected, but there are some important notes we want to point out as well that are more than just Switch 2 more expensive and that's bad. We do think that, but we are hoping to add more nuance and detail to our impressions of the new handheld. A quick note about the price: a 50% increase from the Switch to the Switch 2 is significant and is a stark reminder that nothing is immune to inflation. That level of increase, though, does undercut the original Switch's reputation as a more budget-friendly option, as on average, most people's wages have not increased by 50% at the same time. I can raise my hand to that, absolutely. Both consoles sport the ability to use the unique Nintendo cartridge combined with access to their online store. 10 years ago, I probably would have complained more about needing internet access for everything, but I have wholeheartedly given up on that. Internet access is mandatory for everything, with some arguing that internet access should be a human right. I actually also agree with that. This is a mixed bag, as I personally believe that the internet is super helpful, but is also a vile hive of scum and villainy, to quote the old sci-fi film from the 70s. Fun fact also, I wrote a paper about that in my schooling, about how the internet is a human right, but people can't be trusted to make good choices.
We could probably write an episode on that. That would be something you should bring up on future episodes. The Switch 2 sports 12 gigabytes of RAM, up from 4 gigabytes. For reference, that's not a ton, considering this is the same amount of RAM as the Galaxy S25 and slightly more RAM than the iPhone 16, which sports 8 gigabytes. To fortify my loathing for Apple products, the memory specs were not listed on the Apple website, and I had to go to a third-party article to view that particular stat. And because I'm not done throwing shade, I went to IGN's site, and their review of the iPhone didn't have the RAM call out either. Just so we're clear, your available RAM is critical to playing video games and is in the top 3 hardware items you can upgrade to improve your PC if you are so inclined to build your own tower. CPU, GPU, and RAM are the most important hard points on a PC, console, or hardware to ensure long-term peak performance. At least that's been my experience.
Comparing CPUs is more complex as you need to compare the amount of cores and their relative speed. The new switches use the ARM A78C based on the A78 processor from the same company. The 78C is the purpose-built to be part of a scalable and secure computer solution for next-generation on-the-go devices, such as always-on laptops, per the manufacturer. The problem with that, though, is that the chip was announced in 2020 and multiple newer models of this chipset have been out since then. Honest to goodness, I can't think of a reason Nintendo would use this chipset that's already 5 to 6 years old when the life cycle of the previous Switch was 8 years. If Nintendo came out with a Switch 3 8 years from now, their chip would be 13 years old. It certainly doesn't help assuage the claims that the Switch is using old hardware because, well, it is. Nintendo is really the only company that can get away with something like this since all of their games are bespoke to their own hardware. The developers for Switch only have to think about the hardware they are given and not the multiple systems, since games like Mario Kart will never be on the PlayStation or Xbox. Otherwise, then Nintendo would be the lowest common denominator for the dev teams and would greatly impact the performance of cross-platform titles.
This is why we tend to see ports of older games on the Switch and never new titles from large studios. Let's look at the catalog of Star Wars games, as this is in fact a Star Wars channel. Games like Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, Outlaws, and Battlefront will never be on the Switch 2. Probably. They are too graphic intensive to ever do well on such a low-powered console, but that's because they were never designed to be. The lowest common denominator for those games was probably the Xbox Series S. That's the white one without the CD drive. The Series S sported a lower frame rate, display resolution, memory, and RAM compared to any other system by design, as it was meant to be a budget-friendly console. It's still apples and oranges to the Switch 2, since I would argue that the Switch has been first and foremost a handheld console that just so happens to be able to dock with the TV. Most of my Switch time has been playing on handheld and not docked on the TV, although that is changing with my enjoyment of the latest Mario Party. This is why we tend to see older ports of games like Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, Jedi Outcast, or the classic Battlefront collection, the Dark Force remake, and my personal favorite, Republic Commando. Holy heck, that game was so awesome. It does not really hold up, but it was so good, and I have just rose-tinted glasses thinking about the old Republic Commando game. Rest in peace, Sev. He was a real one. Officially, he is listed as MIA since Commandos never die.
It makes me sad just thinking about it. We talked about RAM, we talked about CPU, but what about GPU? The new GPU seems stacked compared to the previous Switch, with 6 times as many cores and the ability to increase its clock speed from 561 MHz while portable and 1007 MHz while docked. This is what is bringing the Switch 2 to the modern era, which, let's be honest, it's meeting the minimum qualifications, not leading the way as far as TV consoles. Their focus is handheld first, and with the ubiquity of USB-C, it is so easy for the Switch to have that option to have a smaller form factor to transmit power, data, audio, and video through a single cable that is available as a commercial off-the-shelf product. USB-C is so cool, I love it so much, and it's even being used on newer laptops as their input-output type, making everything so much more standardized. To defend my beloved Apple products, new Apple products are also USB-C.
Why are they USB-C, though?
Because the European Union forced them to be.
Thank you.
I'm not an Apple stan. I get what my wife wants me to get, okay? Nintendo just so happened to be benefiting from this technology, and I don't know if they would have developed the Switch to function with a dock. I truly don't know and can't say one way or the other. I think they still would have developed the Switch to do both because it allows them to develop a single console for handheld and TV capable without having to develop a second console in parallel. I can't say what would have been, but I can give a strong opinion stating a Wii 2 would not have done so well. The Wii was fine, but in a lot of ways, even more substandard than the Switch.
Handheld gaming has another critical weakness that a console or PC doesn't have, and that is space. the amount of storage that is typically found on your phone or handheld electronics is lower because it requires a certain amount of physical space to put a larger hard drive. On my PC, I could load up another couple terabytes quite easily without changing the form factor of my PC. All I have to do is plug in a new hard drive to an open slot on my motherboard, make sure it's properly attached, and then enable that hard drive in my settings, and just like that, I have a new drive that increased my available storage by an order of magnitude. The Switch 2 has the option to increase its decently sized onboard memory of 256 gigabytes with a micro SD card. This is good and bad, but mostly good, actually. It's good because players can increase their memory as they see fit. Odds are, as time goes on, players will have to be very particular with the games they have installed on their little switcheroo, or will be forced to buy an SD card to keep them all loaded.
For reference there, my cell phone is, 7 years old now, and I have 128 gigabytes of memory on it. So them only having 256 seems kinda low.
It is low.
With the change to how Nintendo issues their cartridges, there is almost no real data on the cartridge for this new generation, and this is probably the second most insidious change to the Switch ecosystem. The first being that Nintendo can remotely brick your console if you were caught doing anything unlicensed to it. A quote from a PC Mag article states, "The bricking occurs after the company quietly updated its user agreement last month to explicitly say, quote, may render the Nintendo Switch account services and or the applicable Nintendo device permanently unusable in whole or in part, unquote. If prohibited activity has been detected." Oh my god, Nintendo's big brother.
Listen, cheating is bad. Don't cheat. Personally, I don't even see how you could get any fulfillment out of a game that you're cheating while playing, especially in a multiplayer game. It's like, cool, you have an aimbot. Does that give you any satisfaction whatsoever by doing that? That being said, I still think it's a little bit of an overreach to brick people's consoles. It seems harsh, especially since the target demo for the Switch is aimed at younger folks. Listen, kids do dumb things. Their brains are literally not developed enough to understand and think through the consequences of risky behavior. Maybe we could show just a touch more grace to our little ones. Because sometimes, scientifically speaking, kids be stupid. They don't know any better.
Remember, folks, adults are dumb as well.
Amen.
The second worst thing is the issue with the cartridges themselves. Essentially, the next generation of cartridges will basically have no game data whatsoever and are essentially a key to download the game. On top of that, players aren't buying the game. They're buying a license to play the game. It technically doesn't affect the gameplay at all, but it's another step closer to people not being able to own and operate the things they spend money on. Generally in the industry, this is true and is not unique to the Switch. This is the exact same model as Game Pass over on Xbox, a service that we both use and honestly really enjoy. But actually, we did the cost-benefit analysis in our Patreon server to show when Game Pass would stop saving you money and start costing you more. Not to brag, but our patron server is sick as hell. We got stats, we got math, we got analysis. It's a good time.
This model of having to download all your games means that players will chew through their storage really quick. In this regard, it's almost a good thing that the Switch can't support games like Call of Duty because it wouldn't be able to fit. I can already hear some of you saying, won't the Ally have the same problem? And yes, it will. One difference between the Xbox Ally and the Switch is that even the Ally, the white one, comes with 512 gigabytes, so twice as strong as the Switch already, and the black one comes with a full terabyte. So we're talking about double and quadruple the amount of memory right out of the gate. There's a lot of memory, but games are not getting smaller, so that memory is still going to get eaten up at a rapacious rate. Thankfully, the Ally also comes with an SD card slot, so the problem is solvable. It's sort of future-proofed. I'm an indecisive person by nature, so the game I want to play that particular day will probably switch, which is good to have lots of memory because then I can have lots of options depending on essentially how I'm feeling at that time.
Andrew, your comment about the Ally transitions us into this next part really well. So we got to talk about the Ally really quick. We've rambled enough about the Switch, and it's crazy to me that right on the heels of the Switch 2 announcement, we get the Ally. Combine the Ally with the Steam Deck, and the Switch went from the dominant, undisputed champion in the handheld console to a rival. The 250 gigabyte LCD Stream Deck is $400, so looking across at memory, the Steam Deck is the better deal. The real kicker is how much the Ally costs. Here is how the decision tree breaks down for those looking for a new handheld. First is, do you care which games you want to play? Nintendo, Steam, or Xbox/Steam? Is cost important? Is image quality important? The way you answer these questions will lead you to your answer. Keep in mind that this is a pick two type of situation. If you are looking to spend the least amount of money, the LCD Steam Deck is your best option. If you want to play the newest Zelda, then Nintendo is the way to go. But if you want to pay more and your image quality will suffer in comparison. On the subject of price, we do not know how much the Ally will cost. The current ROG Ally, not affiliated with Xbox, comes in at $500 and $650 depending on which chipset and memory option you are looking for. I would think that the Xbox Ally would also come into a similar price point. I mean, it better, right? Otherwise, I'm going to be looking at a Steam Deck, even though I really want to be able to play my Xbox games. If that sounds like a lot, it is. You ain't wrong. That's the same price as a console. So at that price, why wouldn't I buy a larger console? Again, that's apples and oranges at this point. Fundamentally, it's a different audience for someone who needs handheld, a console, or a PC. There are different barriers and allures to each, while still being able to play some of the same games.
A topic of discussion we haven't even broached yet is ergonomics, and I can tell the Xbox Ally will probably have the best ergonomics because it is starting with the form factor of a controller and not just a flat pad. It will be heavier, which is a point against it, but the Switch and the Steam Deck require more of a pinch grip to use. This means your hands are working harder with less weight. I personally have always had to upgrade my original Switch with better ergonomics because I cannot bear how small the Joy-Cons are. I even got some aftermarket Joy-Cons that are more ergonomic, and they are awesome. They then mysteriously disappeared off of Amazon after I purchased them, which weirded me out a little bit. I can only assume the Nintendo legal team assassinated the shop these were being built in. We are really curious. What do you all think about the Switch 2? What about the Ally or the Steam Deck? Each have their pros and each have their cons, and it's not really a clear-cut choice. And I think most handheld customers are going to make their decision based on the available games more than anything else. Is that the case for you? Let us know in the comments.
All right, so we've got some discussion questions we want to go over here. So Andrew, I want to start this first one off and pose it to you first. Would you buy the Switch 2? And explain your answer.
Pains me to say because I have been such a fan of the Switch and I've really liked my Switch, and my wife and I get a lot of use out of our Switch playing together. It has a lot more friendly games that her and I can play cooperatively, but no, I don't think I'm going to be getting a Switch 2 at this time unless I can get some sort of deal or something. But $450 is kind of steep. Like, that's a lot of money considering most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and I'm not any different. Life is really hard right now for a myriad of reasons. Spending the money on a Switch 2 is not really in the cards for me.
Funny enough, I'm actually right there with you. I would not buy the Switch 2, not necessarily for the price. I do think it's overpriced. I think you nailed it on the head there. However, I don't have enough love for the Nintendo IPs to justify spending that much money. Like, that's just what it comes down to for me. I don't want to play the games that much to warrant spending $450. I could spend that on so many Xbox games.
So speaking of cost, though, how much do you think the Xbox Ally is going to cost?
Now, I think they are going to do one of two things here. I think they are going to make it comparable to the Switch, which they totally could do, or Xbox partnering with Ally, because Ally is another company, correct?
That is the Asus product.
Thank you.
Okay, so Asus created the Ally.
I think that they are going to undercut. I think realistically what's going to happen is they're going to undercut the Switch 2 by like $75. I think they're going to try to sell this for about $375 because you should not be selling this for more. Whoa, you adjusted your camera. You just zoomed out.
I literally just opened up my camera settings because I couldn't get the blur to go away and it reset. So really sorry for the viewers. My bad.
No, that's good though. I think that's the angle we're both using now. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Sweet.
I'll just leave it.
Sorry, momentary distraction, but I think they're going to sell, like, I think that the Xbox Ally will be $375, because keep in mind, when you're buying like the Xbox One or the Xbox X, whatever it is, they are not making a ton of profit on that machine. The purpose of that is to mostly break even with production and research costs and then sell games and their services, because that's how they get constant money coming in. If they're counting on your one-time purchase to make all their money, they would never make money. Like, that's not enough to fuel this industry. They have to have money coming in consistently, and I think that they would just try to break even, maybe sell it for a little bit more. But again, the key there is if you save on the console, you're more likely to probably spend that money somewhere else on using that platform, and then they make more money in the long term. That's my theory.
Yeah, and for people who take good care of their consoles, they occasionally dust it and don't transport it all that often. Consoles last a long time. I'm pretty convinced that my original Xbox One would still be running if I still had it.
I'll take things in my office that last longer than I do for $500, Alex.
I cannot keep that.
No! That was so witty!
Okay, back on topic though. So we kind of talked about it though. Do you think the Xbox Ally is going to be worth buying? Is that something you would consider purchasing?
That's a hard one for me. In my current state, no. And I'm going to say, because sitting in front of me, like within this office, I have two desks right next to each other, which have two PCs. One of them is an outdated PC. It's almost a complete brick at this point. A laptop, an Xbox, and my phone. Between all of those pieces, we have a Switch that sits in a transport bag, and we never use it. So the idea of buying another electronic is like kind of rough. And also I'm like, I didn't use my Switch enough. Like, that shows me right away that I don't think I would use my Ally all that much. Like, I'm sitting here, I have books up on my shelf that I plan to read and have not opened those. Like, in my brain, I'm like, I should read those and consume that entertainment before I go out and I buy a hugely expensive piece of technology I may or may not use.
I totally get that. Like, I mean, if you don't have a use case for it, like, trust your gut. And we certainly are not proponents of rampant spending on this channel. We're usually going to have more financially conservative options. Like, we're going to tell you, like, hey, maybe save your money. Like, don't just buy everything full price, and never pre-order. What a waste of money. Oh man. Like, the game will go on sale. You will not miss out. And if it's a good game, it still will be around by the time it's on sale.
I mean, we started out our Patreon discussion today talking about how we're back into playing State of Decay 2.
There's still like a multiplayer scene there. Like, I accidentally shot off a flare in one of our recent playthroughs that we were all doing. And just like, I was like, hey, what does this button do? And it was like, oh, a random stranger has joined your game. I was like, that's really quick. I don't know you. I am going to remove you from the party, but thank you for joining so quick. Okay, the last discussion question I wanted to talk about, because this is not a hardware channel. We're not a hardware channel, but we do interact with all of these things on a daily basis, all the time. So it does affect us. So what does this mean for how we enjoy Star Wars? How does this mean? What are the implications for how we enjoy Warhammer? In reference to either the Switch 2 or the Xbox Ally.
You summed it up very well earlier in the episode when you said Nintendo is not going to be in a hurry to pursue titles that are not within its specific realm of exclusive IPs. I think it is going to eventually get some of these titles onto the Switch, but not at the beginning. I think like Star Wars games are not going to make their way to the Switch for a very long time. I don't know if they'll ever put a Warhammer game on the Switch 2. I don't know if there's any on the Switch right now. Maybe you know.
I think Bolt Gun is on the Switch, but that's supposed to be like a 16-bit type shooter that has a lower graphical fidelity. And that is like the allure. That's the whole point. That is the artistic style. And that's why I think it's on the Switch. Whereas a game like Space Marine 2, we would have to get like a Switch 4 for it to be able to play Space Marine.
Yeah, we're generations away from that. So I don't think it's going to do much for Star Wars or Warhammer, the IPs that we're the most interested in and talk about on this podcast. So I don't think it's going to do much for those. I think it's going to enhance their current IPs. I've heard good things about the new Mario Kart, but other than that, I don't think it's going to do much for what we really love.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that disappoints me the most is there's none of the biggest content IPs that I want to see. I get that people love Pokemon, all the power to you. It's just not something I grew up with. And so we watched, I think, the original anime a little bit, but that was the extent. Most of our Pokemon video game experience was when we would go over to friends' houses and play Smash Bros. Like that's it.
Pokemon Stadium.
And Pokemon Stadium, I did like that one.
That was a fun one.
But as far as like Star Wars games, first off, we've already talked about this a lot on the channel. They're not making enough new Star Wars games. It's the fourth biggest IP in the world. Make more Star Wars games.
Obligatory Battlefront 3 Screech.
Yeah, where am I? I need it. Warhammer is in even a worse spot as far as like titles on the Switch because, first off, there's actually a lot of Warhammer games out there, and most of them are terrible. I have like half an episode written about like Warhammer has a mobile game problem because it releases the same mobile game over and over and over again. Like they're all like different card-based games, but they're like, oh, this one is 40K and this one is 30K. It's like, dude, this is the same game, just in a slightly different time period. This would be like if Star Wars created a card game and they're like, awesome, this one is the Old Republic. And you're like, awesome. Like, is this going to include different time eras? They're like, no, you have to download a different app for that. You're like, what are you doing?
It's wild to me that they are doing what they do. But again, those games exist not to be fun, but to encourage people to buy more tabletop like supplies and more Black Library books.
Yeah, the state of mobile gaming is really, really terrible. Like, it's honestly just a cesspool of places that want to take your time and attention away. And again, we might do a whole episode more on this.
We've talked about mobile games in the past and how, like, for a brief minute, we were stoked on mobile games. And then they just kind of took a turn for the worst when they died. They were like, oh, we're going to come out with all these new titles, and they sucked. They were so bad. As somebody who played Call of Duty Mobile a lot and even streamed it for a while, it was so fun. It was bad. Like, the quality of the game was bad. Genuinely, like, had performance problems. Graphics weren't great. But again, you were playing a mobile shooter, and you're like, I could connect my controller to my phone. This is wild. It was a new thing, and then they tried doing that with other titles, and I don't think most of those new titles that came out are even around anymore. So, yeah, RIP.
Yeah, there's nothing good from Star Wars or Warhammer coming to the Switch, and that's really what makes me excited about the Xbox Ally, is because, like, we will sit around and, like, watch TV. We like watching TV together, but we also rewatch a lot of shows together, and that's not mentally engaging enough for me. So a lot of times I will just read a book, or I will be on my phone. Probably more likely that I'm going to be on my phone. But it would be nice in those moments to be able to have something like the Xbox Ally, because then I'm not taking the TV away from my wife who wants to watch a show. Like, she doesn't want to play Xbox. She wants to watch a show, and that's fine. I want to play Xbox. I don't want to watch a show. And that's fine. So having the Ally would be a good middle ground to where we would both be able to do what we both want to do at such a steep price point. I don't know if I'll get it. So we'll see. And with the ability to stream Xbox gameplay through your browser now, I don't know if you guys can do that, but Xbox Remote Play is just a website you can go to, and you can stream it to like a laptop. It's like, well, I have a laptop. Now I can just open a laptop and stream to that. And Xbox controllers are Bluetooth. You can just control it, so I can then still watch TV and play the games I want to play, and I don't have to spend $600, $500 to do the same thing. So what's the incentive?
Checkmate, so we'll see. Nintendo.
I mean, Nintendo, you could always just undock it. And when I played Minecraft, and there was on Bedrock Edition, there was the cross-compatibility between Xbox and Switch. I loved that. I played the crap out of that. We even streamed it here on the channel a lot. And
yeah.
for a significant amount of time, we had a patron server for Minecraft, and people played in it. Once that waned off, we turned it off, and that's okay, but it was fun while it lasted.
I still think about going back to Minecraft every once in a while. Maybe when I'm out of school, I'll go back into Minecraft.
You would love Satisfactory.
I agree, but I can't take on too many new games or I will never get my schoolwork done.
Smart. As far as nerddom news, ladies and gentlemen, we don't really have anything for you. We're trying to actually cut down on the length of our episodes, so I think we're done here.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Huge thanks to our patrons, Mike, Isaac, and David. Right now, all patrons are automatically entered into our lightsaber giveaway. The pool is so small right now, and we do this every single year. We keep the giveaway entrance period open for about 3 months. So patrons for that entire time will get 3 auto entries into the giveaway. If you can't support us on Patreon, then please share this with a friend. Leave a comment that Ewok stole my speeder so that we know that you're a real one, you made it all the way through, or leave us a 5-star review. If you love us a ton, you'll do all of those things, and we'll love you forever. Until next time, guys, may the Force be with you.